Hi everyone, I'm Dada Willis Gregory. Welcome back to Social Justice Talks. Again, we're here trying to continue the conversation around race and ethnicity, and we really want to keep the momentum going. So again, ladies, we got submitted questions for you all to answer. Our first one's kind of a doozy. What advice do you have for having or initiating difficult conversations about race with family and friends? And how can you be more sensitive when discussing race?
I think this one's kind of hard because when it's something you're so passionate about, you can sometimes become kind of like angry or appear angry and aggressive maybe with your stance. I know sometimes when I'm having conversations about something I'm passionate about, that's what I resort to. But when it's family and friends you're trying to have that conversation with, you really want them to understand. So there's that extra injection of passion. Like, you want them to understand, but you don't want to offend them in the same way. And it can be easy to say, well, they should have this opinion, this is the right opinion, but you don't want to sometimes just cut off your whole family, you know? You want to be able to have the conversation and still maintain a relationship. And reality is, everyone isn't always going to have the exact same opinion as you. So I think when you go into these conversations, you should go into them knowing that it's a conversation. It's not you sitting there with your friend, lecturing them, telling them, this is how you should feel. And if you don't feel this way, then you're a bad person. That's what's worked for me anyway. But in the same vein, I think you should consider the toil it takes on your own mental health. Sometimes like having conversations with all these people about sometimes can be very triggering and traumatic experiences can be a lot for you, you know? When the movement all sort of resurged again over summer, I had a lot of friends and a lot of family come to me saying, oh, what should I do? How should I approach this? What can I do to change? Like, has this ever affected you? And at first I was like, oh, it's kind of my duty to respond to all these people. Like, I've had experiences, you know, I can't answer everything, but it's my duty to do what I can and do research for them. And I was like, Google exists, you know? Like, there are so many books. It doesn't take, I don't know why I'm the one resource you have, the one black friend you have to give you all the answers to all of these things, when you could just type into Google, like, what are good books that I could read to learn about race? What's a good TV show I could watch, you know? And so I don't think you should take on all of that on your own, because recognizing that it can be a lot to be everybody's Wikipedia is important.
It also helps to not, if you do struggle to like talk to friends and family that aren't understanding, it's not about you getting through to them. It's just like slowly introducing them new information or new ideas. Something that has helped to like prevent disagreements that leads to arguments is showing them a video that explains it rather than you trying to get through to them. Sometimes showing them an informative video or something that shows a different perspective can help, or sending them something. It could be pretty short, pretty in-depth. It could be a movie. You could introduce them to a book. But I believe that helps without trying to.
Yeah, and there's like so much stuff going around on like Instagram right now where it's so easy. You can just like, oh, I'm gonna send this to like my random cousin that like wants to learn more, but I don't want to have an argument with them about it. Like, they can read this of their own accord and they don't have to feel judged when I'm having a conversation with them.
Exactly.
I would also add that there's like a level of respect, you know? Like, I get asked this a lot because sometimes like people are like, oh, why weren't you offended by that? And I'm like, like you said, sometimes it's truthfully like if there's someone you know you're trying to talk to, you're not going to be able to get through to them, and it's not worth it, because like you said, it's draining. And like sometimes you have to just have that level of respect. Like, I have people in my life that I love to death and we have very different views, and it's hard for me to just be like, we're not friends anymore. Like,
it's become a new skill to be friends with people you disagree with.
And I was like, and it's because they respect me and I respect them, and maybe we just can't be as close as I would love us to be, like to have these type of conversations. And honestly, some of my friends that we do have different views, I can have those conversations with them, and I understand where they're coming from, and they understand where I'm coming from, and we have that level of respect, and so we're able to actually have those conversations. And I understand there's a certain extent that I'm going to be able to get through to them, and there's a certain extent they'll be able to get through to me, because I don't want to do what like with everyone in this movement, we're trying to be heard. And if I were to not hear somebody else out, I'm doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so I'm like, you have to have that level of respect where I will listen to you and your opinions as long as I get the same respect back.
Yeah. There came like a point, I feel like, in the midst of all this where I was so angry and I was like, I have to cut out everybody that doesn't agree with this. This is my personal things that they're like directly disagreeing with by not having the same opinion as me. And then I was like, okay, you got to be realistic. Like, I can't cut out like, I don't know, like a whole team of professors. Maybe there's a professor that has a different viewpoint to me. They're still my professor at the end of the day, and I have to find a way where we can have a relationship. So yeah, it's become this whole new thing of learning how to still maintain good relationships with people that maybe don't directly agree with everything you're saying.
I think what you ladies are describing is inclusivity, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not that we all have to agree on every issue or every stance, but it's being able to respectfully hear each other out and have a conversation. Two things I try and keep in mind as I approach every conversation is perspective. It's not my job to convert everyone. Like you all said, like, we're having the conversation, let's just converse. And we might walk away and be like, okay, I still don't agree with you and you don't agree with me, but this was fun. Mm-hmm. And to me, that conversation is still a win. And then also I think, which you all hinted at as well, as context, right? Like, when you're having these conversations with people, they may have grown up differently. Like, my grandmother and I grew up in two completely different eras. Like, she lived through Jim Crow. There is not much I can tell her about racism. And I am not going to change her mind or her perspective on things. But we can still have the conversation, and, you know, everyone comes from different walks of life and different experiences. So I think you all did a really good job of just explaining what it is to be inclusive and have meaningful conversations.
Exactly.
So our next question, actually you all hinted on it a little bit. How does racism affect your mental health? Do you feel like sports is a safe environment, and have you experienced racism in sports?
I think that, like, Dora, you touched on it pretty well, of how it, like, can affect your mental health. That there were times that I couldn't go on social media because I would just cry, because I was just like, why do I have to wake up every day and see another person is dead? And then to see all the frustrating hate that came towards it, where people would literally say like that they deserve to die. And I was just like, what if that was me, you know? And like, I think it took so much of a toll as well when, like, you had to keep explaining over and over, because I did as well at first think it was my job to be like, oh, I need to help everybody understand this. And when even there are things that I don't even understand, that I can't, like, people will ask me, why is it like that? And I'm like, I can't tell you. I'm like, truthfully, I don't have an answer for that. Yeah. And it just gets frustrating, and then it's really sad, and it's a lot of heartache, I would say.
What about in sports?
Well, I thankfully haven't had that here at UNM, but I did in club and in high school. That an example of, I went to a college tournament and was heckled the whole time by parents and couldn't perform the way I wanted to because I was being called racial slurs the entire time. And it was interesting to me that when my coach like came over to me at the end of the game, that he was just like, why were you playing like that? And I'm like, do you not hear what they're saying? And like, it felt like to me that he was like, oh, just block it out. I'm like, you can't block something like that out. It's not just like they're saying like, oh, you suck. Like, if someone tells me I suck on the field, I'm like, okay. But like,
I'll show you.
Yeah, I'm all, do I suck? But when someone's calling you such a hateful word, and especially when it's like, I was like 15 and these are parents, that I was just like, oh. And that kind of like triggers you that like, everybody here does not want me here. And it's like, and I was the only black person on my team. So I was like, oh, do my teammates think like this? Or like, the girl I'm marking right now, is she like, ew, this black
almost
girl?
Makes you feel ashamed for being
Yes.
not white.
Yes.
Because of how they were treating you there.
Yes. And I've been told I would get a scholarship only because I'm black.
Yeah,
not because
I've been told that I'm here to fill a quota, and like, yeah, it'll be fine, you'll get in. Cause
Affirmative action in sport.
Yeah.
Not a thing, but okay.
I was like, not because of that I worked hard enough to get here. Yeah.
Avani, if you'll let me dig a little deeper, because I've heard this story before. We've talked about it. You've also had a unique experience in the fact that you're biracial, and this tournament that you're talking about, your mom was there. Do you want to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that, like, my mom didn't really know what to do, you know? Like, she kind of, like I think like my mom has always, when things like this happen, that she's always just like, you know what, screw them. And like I never really would say that at that age that I really stood up for myself. And that's mainly because of like colorism, that I felt like, well, I'm half black, I don't have a right to say this. And truthfully, I never even knew what the right way was to go about it. And I don't think my mom really did either. And because she's surrounded by all these parents and she's the only one. Another example that I could give like for my mom is when I went to a recruiting camp, that I was playing out on the field and parents sat next to my mom and asked her who her kid was. And she pointed to me and they didn't say anything. They just got up and walked away. And the only thing my mom told me, she's like, I cannot have you come to this school. And because she feared that if I went to that school and I'm in a different state that was across the country from her, that if something happened to me,
she wouldn't be there.
Exactly. And, you know, truthfully, in society, when like people would probably look at my mom and be like, why are you helping her? Like, you know, because they would probably be like, well, you're white, you don't associate with that. But, and I can't speak for my mom, truthfully, on like what she was thinking in that moment, but I could tell that she's just like, come on, type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of similar to that, at like lots of competitions when I was younger in England, I'd be out competing. Again, my mum's white as well, and she'd be on the sideline watching, and then she would hear other parents talking about me, not racially, just talking about me, you know, gossiping about me or saying something about my stats or something like that, because they would, of course she couldn't be my mum, she's not the mum to the brown kid over there, like there's no way, like that would happen like most competitions, and then I'd come running over and give her a hug and they'd be like, oh my god, that's what we just said.
Yeah, no, that couldn't have been an easy experience. I'm sure you both learned a lot and are still learning a lot from it, and obviously thank you for just being transparent about it, because I know it's hard to talk about. This kind of directly goes to kind of our committee and what you all do all the time. This question says, shouldn't politics and sports be separate?
You go first.
I don't know. I like in football specifically, I feel like this like was brought up with kneeling, you know, during the anthem and things like that. And we're not two-dimensional people. Yeah, like famous football players, sport is what they're known for, but that is not the only part of their being. Mm-hmm. That's what we all know them for the most, but they're also, they have feelings, they have, you know, emotions outside of being
they're
an
a
athlete.
person.
Yeah, a person, yeah, that was something before they were a football player, and they will be something after, just the same as all of us. Like, we're student athletes, supposedly, yeah, but we also have our own lives and families and things going on outside of it, yeah, and our own voice that has nothing to do with sport. So to be tied down and be labeled, you are only qualified to speak on what I decide you're qualified to speak on, and that is you being an athlete. It's so bizarre, it's absurd, it makes no sense at all, because of course I don't identify as a student athlete. I'm a Dora, so I have lots of thoughts and feelings outside of being a student athlete, and to say that I can't have a political mind because I'm a student athlete makes no sense to me.
Michael Jordan wasn't the one to speak on things. That really wasn't his stance. It wasn't until as of late where he decided to get involved politically and actually speak out on things. So for me, it was interesting seeing that turn of events because of people like LeBron.
You know, news reporters telling him to shut up and dribble or shut up and play. Why aren't we talking about that more? Why aren't we recognizing that that's just the problem of this all? Like, making people only wear a hat, like how you were saying, you wear different hats, you're a Dora, you're not just a student athlete. I think that also being bigger than your sport and using your sport as a platform, and then also passion for how you feel, you can use your experiences as why this movement should keep going, or how your platform should be used to express your feelings or an agenda you think that should be pushed more. Mm-hmm. So
I think that also happens with college athletes as well. That, like, we even saw it with our chalk event. Mm-hmm. That I shouldn't have looked at the comments, but I went and looked, and to see so many people just saying, like, stick to your sport. And it's interesting because I feel like you hear that in all aspects, that, like, if you're not old enough, you don't have a right to talk about it. Like, if you're not in college or out of college, they're like, don't talk about that. You're not an adult yet. And I'm like, I'm an adult. I'm 23. Like, but I was like, and I'm also a person who's like everything. And if we're talking about like politics, like political things affect my life and will affect like the rest, like my family's life. And if I have kids one day, who knows?
It's a privilege to not be
definitely.
political.
Yeah.
Like, for you to not be involved in politics, just to say, oh, I don't like to get into that stuff. It's because you're in a place where you don't have to.
Yeah.
That doesn't affect you. So for you to say, like, the president is not that important to me. I only vote for the things that are important. That just screams that you have privilege and you don't even recognize it.
I think you all hit on very, very good points. Very good points. Oh, so our next question, obviously you all are part of the committee. You've been doing this work for a while. Is it difficult advocating for social justice when progress tends to be slow? How do you stay motivated advocating for equality when the legislation and change can be such a slow process?
Legislation and change, obviously, like legislation is obviously a huge part of like what, like as a committee we're trying to do and like BLM is trying to do. But I think you get satisfaction from the small victories. So like we were saying before, talking to your friends and family, initiating small conversations, who then go and have conversations with their friends and their friends and their friends. And so when they're faced with these opportunities, they can say, actually, I know what to do in this situation, or I see that this isn't right, whereas previously they would have, wouldn't have thought twice about it. So yeah, sometimes progress can be slow, and like, of course, we've seen so many moves backwards, unfortunately. But yeah, I think the passion keeps coming from what I'm seeing when I do things on a grassroots level.
I would also say, like, when you see things move backwards, it fires you up. That you're like, no, I'm not going to let it go back again.
Yeah.
And truthfully, like, I feel like when you're speaking of, like, little wins, like, being able to work with you and Brandy and, like, even the Crown Act, like, working on that was just, like, that was...
I'd say that's a big win.
Yeah, that's a big win. But, like, seeing, like, I didn't even do, like, everything. I did little things to help that, but that was just like I did a little thing to make a huge thing happen, and that took time.
Yeah, and to see it go to each level, getting approved, and to be like, we helped. Like,
yeah, I was like, I was in the Zoom, but it's just like getting when things actually you see change happening, and even just when it's just little conversations or like little things that happen, like when I see people wear our unity shirts at our school and they're like, I love the shirt.
That's
I'm just like
the best.
so like that just makes
feeling.
me so proud because we worked so hard on that, and to see
which might seem small to some people, like it's just a t-shirt, but we got everybody talking about that. Yeah.
And we even, like, I remember you were telling me that some people on your team, like, I don't have the shirt. Like, I want my shirt. And, like, that makes, like, that brings me motivation to keep doing what I'm doing. And it shows me that I'm doing something good. Yeah. That I'm, like, even if not everyone in the world is agreeing with me, at least there's a group of people that stand by me and like to hear what I have to say.
Willing to learn more, willing to hear more. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, ladies. So our next question, how can someone become more educated on social justice topics? We already talked about Google.
Reliable source.
Yeah.
Don't go to Wikipedia.
What else could they do?
I think there are a lot of educational films. However, there are a lot of films that actually counteract, like kind of like that step back. There are a lot of educational films that sometimes put you in the perspective of that person that is being suppressed. Or also there are just like documentaries, like historical things, because a lot of these systemic things come from historical events. So while also it's really important to pay attention to your history classes, it's also important to recognize modern issues. And so they can be, in film, books, conversations like these, and just listening. Again, it's really important, listening.
I would also like add to like the thing about history is we don't learn everything. Yeah. We're learning from a perspective that isn't my perspective, isn't your perspective, because we're all here people of color. And I didn't even notice this like growing up, and then I realized that I was like, oh, why'd they tell it from that point of view? Like, that it's always like someone had to save us. And it's like a savior complex, and they're like, well, we did all of this for you.
What is that term called? Isn't it like
White savior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
And I feel like a lot of the times, if you're not really paying attention to that in your history classes, you're not realizing that they are showing you that they're showing you, well, this person did this for us. And that's what, like when people are like, Abraham Lincoln, I'm like, oh, okay, there's a lot of stuff that goes down with that you're not like focusing on. You're just like, oh, well, he did this for the slaves. And I'm like, he also did a lot of other things.
Yeah, I've learned, they say the winners write history, right? And also recently moving to New Mexico, being originally from Ohio, I learned that history is also super like regional, in the sense that I feel like in Ohio, I didn't learn a lot about like Native American histories or that sort of thing, even though we do have tribes in Ohio. But coming to New Mexico, where it's a lot more prominent and a lot more celebrated, that I've learned way more about Native American and American Indian history than I ever learned in a textbook. So history can also be regional as well. So that's going to wrap it up for our segment of Social Justice Talks. Please watch out for our next installment.